All right, today we're moving along to lesson number 5, graphing sine graphs. Today's date is today. Our objective is to identify the properties of a sine graph, and we get a graphs and sine curves. All right, I have a concept summary here, and everything in that concept summary is something that you are going to need to know. You're given a sine graph, let's say y equals a sine b theta. The absolute value of a is the amplitude of the function. How high, how low is it going? B is the number of cycles from 0 to 2 pi. And 2 pi over b is the period of the function. Make sure you have those in your notes. Make sure you commit those to memory. Those will not be given to you on any test or lesson quiz. I would suggest you go home tonight and make sure that you know them because they will be part of the next lesson quiz. So, I actually have a short little video, so this is something new. I've never done a video within a video, so let's go ahead and we will watch that. I'm not sure how the sound on that is going to come across, so if you had trouble hearing it, there is a link. Talk to me if you were not able to work that link out. That was just a couple of extra examples. A couple things I want to point out with a sine graph. Is it's always going to go, we're just going to do a really basic one right here. Let's say our period is 2 pi. Oops. Half of that would be pi. Half of that would be pi over 2. And I always divide it into fourths. Between pi and 2 pi would be 3 pi over 2. Or 1.5 pi. It's always going to start at a 0, to a max, to a 0, to a minimum, to a 0. That's going to be important for a sine curve. So 0, max, 0, min, 0. Let's actually do some now. So on this one, we've got y equals 4 sine 2 theta. Well, I know my A, my amplitude is the absolute value, is going to be 4. My B is 2. So my period is 2 pi over B, which in this case was 2, or pi. That means every pi, it is completing one cycle, which makes sense because B is 2. There are 2 cycles in the period of 2 pi. So let's go ahead. It's going up 4, and it would be going down 4. Right here would be pi over 2. Oops, getting ahead of myself. Pi over 4 and 3 pi over 4. In the past, I've had students that have had a really hard time figuring out what their hash marks should be. Well, your last hash mark is always going to be what your period is, especially if it's just asking for one cycle. Here, I'm just taking 1/4 times my period, then 1/2 times my period, 3/4 times my period, and 1 times my period. All right, just kind of another way to remember it. So now we've got all the important stuff. Let's go ahead and graph it. So 0, max, 0, min, 0. And there's one cycle. If we had wanted to, we could have extended that out to 2 pi, because that would be another cycle. And it would have done the same thing. 0, max, 0, oops, kind of missed it right there, min, 0. Not the best drawn, but you can get the idea. Make sure you're always looking at the directions on this one. It says sketch one cycle. Sometimes it'll say sketch it from 0 to 2 pi. You'll really want to pay attention to those directions. Let's do another one. All right, this one, if you notice, it's got that negative sign. With that negative sign, you're going to go 0, but instead of going to a max, you're going to go to a minimum, back to your 0, then to the max, back down to 0. So our A is 3, because we're taking the absolute value. B is 4, so our period is 2 pi over b. So let's do that a little bit neater. Which will be 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. So one cycle will be right there at pi over 2. If I had wanted to graph this between 0 and 2 pi, that would just tell me I'm going to have 4 cycles. Half of that would be pi over 4. Right there would be pi over 8. And 3 pi over 8. And our amplitude is 3. So I'm going to start at 0, min, because of that negative sign, 0, max, 0. Go ahead and sketch that. I don't know that I did a great job of sketching it, but when you're sketching it, try not to connect them with straight lines. You want them to be a nice, smooth, fluid curve. You don't want them to be straight lines. All right, I hope you enjoyed.